When the banks froze this family's money, they didn't become poor. They simply started spending three assets the bank couldn't freeze. One was written in a grocery ledger. Another reproduced itself every spring. The third could be exchanged for land, labor, and food, without a single dollar changing hands. While their neighbors stood outside locked bank doors, this family kept buying flour. They kept planting. They kept their land. And here's the strangest part. None of these three things looked like wealth. Not on paper, not to a banker, not even to the family themselves, until the day money simply stopped working. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what those three assets were, why the banking system couldn't touch a single one of them, and why some families are quietly starting to hold the same kinds of assets again today. To understand this family, you have to understand the moment they were living in. It's the early 1930s. The stock market has already collapsed. Farms are failing. Then, almost overnight, something even more frightening happens. Banks start closing their doors. Not for a day, for weeks. Some close permanently. People who had done everything right, worked hard, saved carefully, trusted the system, woke up one morning and couldn't withdraw a single dollar of their own money. It legally belonged to them. It was sitting right there in the vault. But they weren't allowed to touch it. Now imagine you're a parent in that moment. You have children to feed, animals depending on you, and a mortgage payment due. The money you worked your entire life for is sitting behind a locked door with an armed guard standing in front of it. That's the world this family lived in. But here's what almost nobody talks about. While their neighbors panicked, this family didn't. Not because they were rich, not because they had some secret stash of gold beneath the floorboards. It was because, without fully realizing it, they had already built their lives around three things the bank had no direct power over. To understand why those three things mattered so much, we need to go back a little further, to how this family had been living months before the crisis struck. Long before the banks closed, this family had a habit that seemed old-fashioned even for the time. Instead of always paying cash at the general store, they would bring in extra wool, cured meat, honey, or surplus produce. Rather than receiving money for it, the store owner recorded its value by hand in a ledger as store credit. At the time, this seemed like a minor convenience, a way to avoid carrying cash or making an extra trip into town. But when the banks froze, that ledger became something else entirely. Here's the part that catches people off guard. The credit wasn't sitting inside a bank. It wasn't a bank account or a check. It was a private, handwritten agreement between two neighbors, operating outside the banking system. When the bank doors slammed shut, and every dollar the family had on paper became inaccessible, the balance recorded in the merchant's ledger could still be used. The family walked into the store, and the owner simply deducted what they spent from the amount he owed them. In return, he handed over flour, salt, cloth, and other essentials. The handwritten balance in the shopkeeper's drawer had not been frozen because it wasn't a conventional bank deposit. It was value created through real goods, personal trust, and an ongoing commercial relationship. That was the first asset. But it wasn't the only one working in their favor. Around that same time, large agricultural companies were promoting something new: hybrid seeds. Farmers could purchase them for planting, but many hybrid varieties did not reliably reproduce the same desirable traits in the next generation, encouraging farmers to buy new seed again. This family chose a different path. They continued preserving older, open-pollinated seeds selected from their best plants, drying them carefully, and sealing them inside tins and jars. At the time, that decision may have looked stubborn, old-fashioned, or even wasteful, compared with the shiny new varieties being marketed to other farmers. But watch what happened when credit collapsed and families no longer had the cash required to purchase seed from a store. A saved bag of seed didn't merely sit in a cellar and hold its value. It could multiply, plant it, and by the next harvest, that one bag could produce many more seeds. By the following spring, its practical value could be even greater because fewer people in the surrounding area still had independent seed supplies. Think about what that means. This wasn't a static asset like a coin resting inside a drawer. It was a productive asset. Under the right conditions, it could generate food, animal feed, future planting stock, and something valuable enough to exchange with neighbors. A bank could freeze an account. A creditor might pursue land or equipment under the proper legal conditions. But the reproductive potential stored inside a viable seed was much harder to reduce to a number in a financial ledger. It wasn't a conventional financial instrument. It was stored production. That was the second asset. But the third one reveals even more about how differently this family understood wealth. The third asset wasn't something they could hold in their hands. It was an agreement. Instead of relying exclusively on cash transactions, this family, like other rural households, could enter simple private arrangements promising to deliver a set amount of grain after harvest in exchange for something they needed immediately. That might include tools, labor, repairs, or the use of a neighbor's mule for a season. On the surface, it looked like a handshake agreement between farmers. It wasn't the sort of arrangement a commercial bank would normally manage, but that was precisely its advantage. The agreement was tied to future production rather than to cash locked inside a bank. Its value existed between two people who trusted one another enough to put their obligations in writing and honor them later. While cash-dependent neighbors were unable to pay workers, obtain tools, or continue operating normally, this family could exchange future grain for present assistance. They traded surplus goods for services. Their land continued to be worked. Obligations could still be negotiated, and productive activity didn't have to stop simply because dollars were temporarily inaccessible. Three assets: a merchant's ledger that remained usable, seed capable of producing future value, and a private agreement that allowed value to move without passing through a bank. None of them would have appeared prominently on a conventional net worth statement in 1929. Yet when the system that was supposed to protect everyone's money stopped functioning, these were among the things that continued to work. Now here's the part of the story that separates this family from almost everyone around them. They didn't predict the banking crisis. They had no secret warning. They weren't necessarily smarter, luckier, or better connected than their neighbors. What they had, almost by accident, was diversification outside the financial system itself. Not diversification between stocks and bonds, but diversification between dollars and forms of value that had never depended entirely on dollars in the first place. When the bank doors locked and remained closed, neighbors who had done everything right by keeping all their wealth inside a single system discovered that the system could suddenly prevent them from accessing it. This family didn't panic in the same way because it had never depended entirely on that single system. The store credit remained recognized. The seeds retained their productive capacity. Private agreements continued to be honored from neighbor to neighbor. It's worth sitting with that for a moment. The people placed in the most vulnerable position weren't always those who owned the least. They were often those whose access to everything they owned depended on one system they didn't control. So, What happened to this family in the end? They continued working their land while other properties were lost at auction. They kept producing food while some neighbors waited in relief lines. When the banks finally reopened under new rules and with public confidence badly shaken, the family did not have to restart its entire life. Its productive system had never completely stopped. The uncomfortable truth beneath the story is that the danger was never only about banks. It was about placing every form of value you possess inside a system that may not be able or willing to return it according to your schedule. That isn't exclusively a problem of the 1930s. It is a timeless vulnerability. Systems can freeze. Access can be restricted. Rules can change quickly. When that happens, people whose entire financial lives depend on one institution can find themselves standing outside a locked door. The families that remained resilient weren't necessarily those with the most money. They were often the ones who possessed useful, productive, tangible, or trust-based forms of value that continued functioning after one part of the system failed. That doesn't mean abandoning banks, hiding wealth, or attempting to recreate the economy of the Great Depression. It means recognizing the difference between ownership and access. An account balance can represent wealth, but it is also a claim processed through an institution. Seed can represent stored production. A trusted commercial relationship can preserve purchasing power. A useful agreement can connect present needs with future output. Each asset carried its own risks. A merchant could fail. Seeds could spoil or produce a poor harvest. A contract could be disputed, and future crops might never materialize. These assets weren't invincible. They were simply exposed to different kinds of failure. That was the real advantage. The store ledger represented value created in the past that could be used in the present. The seeds converted present restraint into future production. The private agreement allowed future production to satisfy a present need. Past, present, and future. The family had unintentionally created a small financial system capable of moving value through time without requiring every transaction to pass through the same account. If this story hit home, if it made you think differently about where your own value sits right now, that is exactly why I make these videos. I dig into the parts of financial history that most people were never taught and turn them into stories that can help us think more clearly about our own lives today. If you want more stories like this, subscribe, because we're going deeper into this period and the financial lessons hidden inside it. And I want to hear directly from you in the comments. If the banks froze your accounts tomorrow, what is one useful thing you currently own, know, or can produce that would still retain value? Did your parents or grandparents keep cash in a tin, maintain store credit, preserve seed, collect tools, own productive land, or keep something outside the bank that they never fully explained? Tell us what it was and where your family learned the habit. Some of the best stories in this series may come directly from your comments. If this video gave you something to think about, give it a like so that other people looking for these stories can find it too. And stick around, because next time, we're telling the story of a family that did the opposite of everything you've just heard, and paid the price for it. This family didn't survive because it predicted the exact day the banks would close. It survived because it had already answered a question most people wait until a crisis to ask. If money stopped working tomorrow, what would still work for you?